The order came at 0400, delivered not through official channels, but whispered through clenched teeth by a man who'd never once seen combat. The dog leaves this base by sunrise, or he dies. Petty Officer Maya Caldwell stood in the cold fluorescent light of Kennel Block C, military police at her back, and watched Lieutenant Commander Victor Hale sign the removal order with the casual ease of someone canceling a magazine subscription. Havoc, 87 pounds of decorated combat muscle, a dog who had pulled bleeding soldiers from rubble in 3 different countries, pressed his flank against Maya's leg and didn't move. Neither did she. Not yet. If this story already has your heart pounding, stay with me until the end. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The morning it all broke open started the way bad mornings usually do, quietly and then all at once. Maya had been awake since 0330, which wasn't unusual. She slept badly on the best nights, and this hadn't been a best night. Naval Security Base Redstone Harbor sat on a narrow spit of Virginia coastline where the wind off the water had a particular bite to it in late October, the kind that found the gaps in your jacket and stayed there. She'd pulled on her uniform in the dark, laced her boots by feel, and walked the quarter-mile from her barracks to the kennel block, the same way she did every morning, head down, coffee untouched in her hand because the cafeteria stuff tasted like hot rust. She heard it before she saw it. Voices. More than one. And lights. The bright sweep of a vehicle's headlamps cutting across the gravel lot outside Kennel Block C. Maya rounded the corner of the building and stopped. 3 military police vehicles sat with their engines running, 6 MPs in full gear, and Lieutenant Commander Victor Hale in his service uniform at 4 in the morning, which told her everything she needed to know about how planned this was. Hale was not a man who did anything without planning. 44 years old, career security officer, the kind of face that managed to look both well-rested and perpetually annoyed. He had transferred to Redstone Harbor 8 months ago from a base in San Diego that no one wanted to talk about, and in those 8 months he had rearranged the base security division the way someone rearranges furniture they didn't pick out, impatiently and without asking. He was holding a folded paper. Even from 30 feet away, Maya recognized the format, a removal order. Petty Officer Caldwell. He said her name without looking up from the paper. Good. Saves me sending someone to find you. She walked toward him because standing at the edge of the parking lot would only buy her seconds, and she needed minutes. Sir, what's happening? The K9 unit has been suspended pending review. He finally looked at her. His eyes were the flat gray of old concrete. Havoc is being remanded to the Coastal Animal Control Facility in Harwick until a determination can be made. What determination? Whether the animal is safe for continued service. Maya stared at him. He's a decorated military working dog. He has 8 years of... He attacked a superior officer 3 days ago. Hale's voice didn't change register. That's the determination. He didn't attack anyone. She kept her own voice level with effort. There was an incident in the training yard, but it was a misread. Corpsman Reitz came up behind him during a high-stress drill without announcing himself. Havoc reacted. That's what the dog is trained to do. The corpsman has a documented injury. A bruised forearm. Still documented. Hale folded the paper once more and handed it to the nearest MP. This isn't a conversation, Petty Officer. This is a notification. The removal is scheduled for 0600. You can be present or not. He started to turn away. I want to see the incident report, Maya said. The full one. And I want to review the training yard footage. Hale paused. Just half a beat, which was the thing she'd remember later. That half beat where something moved behind those concrete eyes and then went still again. The footage is under review by the security division. Then I'll wait for it. You'll do your assigned duties and let this process work. He looked at her the way people look at something minor that's become an inconvenience. I'd suggest you spend the next 2 hours thinking about your own record, Caldwell. You've been here 11 months. You're not tenured. You don't have the standing to make this harder than it needs to be. He walked to his vehicle. The MPs stayed. Maya stood there in the October dark and tried to breathe normally. Havoc was in his kennel when she got inside. Crate 7, end of the row, the one with the extra bolt she'd added herself because he knew how to work standard latches, and had once let himself out to investigate a food delivery that he deemed suspicious. He lifted his head when she came in. His ears went up. He read her the way he always did, something in his posture shifting slightly, and then he stood and pressed his nose against the chain link. "Hey," she said. She put 2 fingers through the link and he pushed his muzzle into them. "Hey, buddy." He was a Belgian Malinois, or mostly. Somewhere in his line there was something else, maybe German Shepherd, that gave him a slightly broader skull and a more measured temperament than pure Mals tended to have. His coat was the standard sable and tan, but his left ear had a small notch in it from an incident in Kandahar that predated Maya's assignment with him by 4 years. He had a scar on his left hip that she'd traced with her fingers enough times to know it by feel. He was also, by any metric that mattered, better at his job than most of the handlers she'd worked alongside. Not because he was aggressive, he wasn't, not inappropriately, but because he was precise. He understood escalation. He knew when to wait. She'd been assigned to him 14 months ago and had spent the first 3 weeks convinced he didn't like her. It took her that long to understand that he was evaluating her. He did like her. He just needed the data first. "They're going to come at 6, she said quietly. He watched her. "I need to figure out what to do before 6. She had 2 hours. The duty officer on watch tonight was Petty Officer Second Class Darnell Wick, who was thorough and rule-following and would not help her. The senior handler, Chief Petty Officer Lena Farrow, was on leave in North Carolina for a family thing that had been scheduled for months. The base legal officer didn't take calls before 0800. Maya sat down on the floor outside Havoc's crate, back against the cinder block wall, and thought. The incident 3 days ago. She'd been 10 yards away when it happened. They'd been running a distraction exercise in the East Training Yard, multiple personnel moving at random intervals while Havoc tracked a scent trail. Corpsman Reitz had appeared from behind a wooden barrier at the exact moment Havoc had come around the corner of it from the other side, and the dog had shoulder-checked him hard enough to put him on his back. No bite. No broken skin. Reitz had said, at the time, "My fault, I didn't call out," and laughed it off. He had not, to Maya's knowledge, filed any incident report. So where had this documentation come from? And the footage? She hadn't thought about the footage at the time because there was nothing to think about. It was a non-incident. But Hale had said it was under review, which meant someone had pulled it, which meant someone had been watching for a reason. She pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. There was one person at Redstone who might actually have access to what she needed, and it was not someone she liked calling at 0400. She called anyway. The line rang 4 times, and then, "Caldwell, this better be good." "Petty Officer Osei, are you near a terminal right now?" A pause. Kwame Osei worked base communications and had the particular gift of being able to access almost any internal system while maintaining plausible deniability about whether he'd technically been authorized to do so. He was 26, clever in the sideways manner of people who'd learned young that frontal approaches rarely worked, and he owed Maya a favor from an incident involving a misaddressed shipment of electronics that she had quietly helped him explain away 8 months ago. "I'm always near a terminal," he said. "What do you need?" Incident report filed against K9 Havoc in the last 72 hours. Training yard footage from October 18th, East Yard, approximately 1340 hours. And the current status of those files. Another pause. She could hear him moving. "Give me 10 minutes. He called back in 7. "Okay." His voice was different now. Lower. Careful. The incident report was filed by Corpsman Reitz at 0900 yesterday morning. Except... He stopped. "Except what?" "Except the metadata on the file says it was created at 0845, which is 15 minutes before it was filed. That's normal. Documents get drafted before submission. But the document creation timestamp also shows it was accessed and modified at 2300 the night before, which would be before Reitz supposedly wrote it." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. "Someone else wrote it." "I can't say that. What I can say is that the file has fingerprints that don't match standard solo authorship." He paused. "The footage is gone." "Gone how?" "Deleted from the training yard archive at 1100 yesterday. Deletion logged under a Security Division administrative account." He paused. "Those accounts are Hale's division." Maya stood up. Havoc tracked the movement and stood with her, his nails clicking on the kennel floor. "Kwame? I need you to check something else. Is there anything in the base records about a K9 service history review for Havoc? Anything involving his service record prior to Redstone? Like what? I don't know yet. Anything flagged? Anything sealed? Anything with a unit designation that isn't standard K9? A longer pause. She could hear keys clicking. There's a sealed service annotation, Military Working Dog Registry, attached to Havoc's profile. Classification level Delta 4. Another pause. Caldwell, Delta 4 is Special Operations Tier. She hadn't known that. In 14 months, she had never been given Havoc's full service history, which wasn't unusual. Handlers often weren't, especially if the dog had come out of a classified unit. You worked with what you had. But,
Can you access what it says?
no. He said it flat and definite. That's above both our pay grades by a significant margin. What I can tell you is that it exists, and that whoever sealed it did it through a JAG office out of Joint Special Operations. A pause. Maya, what's going on? She looked at Havoc. He looked back at her, ears forward, waiting. I'm not sure yet, she said, but don't go to work through the main gate today. Take the side entrance. That's not reassuring. I know. She hung up. At 0520, she made a decision she was not certain she had the authority to make. She went into Havoc's file cabinet, the physical one, the one handlers kept for medical records and training logs, and pulled his complete paper documentation, not the digital record, the physical one, which nobody had gotten around to purging or updating in the way digital systems got updated, because nobody cared about paper anymore. At the back of the file, behind his vaccination records and his bite sleeve maintenance log, was a folded copy of his intake paperwork from when he'd arrived at Redstone Harbor 2 years before Maya. Transfer origin, Warcom K9 support attachment, Joint Base Little Creek, Oceania. Warcom, Naval Special Warfare Command. The dog sitting in front of her had come from a SEAL unit. Maya sat with that for a moment. Warcom didn't loan dogs to regular security bases. They didn't transfer their working dogs into standard military police K9 units. If Havoc was here, at Redstone Harbor, working vehicle searches and perimeter patrol and base access screening, it was because something had changed. A mission completed. An injury, maybe. Or a handler lost. She folded the intake paper carefully and put it in her jacket pocket. At 0545, she heard vehicles on the gravel. They came in 2 trucks. 4 contractors in civilian clothing with a transport crate that was too small for a dog Havoc's size, which told Maya they had never handled a working dog before and had not been advised by anyone who had. Behind them were 2 MPs and Hale's adjutant, a young lieutenant named Presser, who had the look of someone who had been handed an assignment he didn't fully understand and was trying to execute it faster than his doubts could catch up. Maya was standing outside Kennel Block C when they pulled up. She had Havoc on lead beside her. Presser stopped when he saw her. Petty Officer Caldwell, the removal is authorized. I know it is, she said. I'm not stopping it. She kept her voice completely neutral because neutral was all she had left. I'm requesting a delay of 48 hours to allow for JAG review of the incident documentation. Presser glanced at the contractors, then back at her. The order doesn't include a delay provision. Any military working dog transfer can be held pending legal review if the handler formally contests the documentation's authenticity. She had looked that up at EO 430 on the base legal database, which was publicly accessible even if the duty officer wasn't available. I'm formally contesting it, right now in front of witnesses. She looked at the 2 MPs. They looked at the gravel. I'll need that on record. Presser was young enough that he didn't know if she was right, and that uncertainty bought her something. He pulled out his radio. I need to call the lieutenant commander. That's appropriate, Maya said. While he called one of the contractors, a heavy-set man with a sunburn who had clearly misjudged the October coastal wind when he dressed that morning, walked toward Havoc with the 2 small crates' door open. Let's get him loaded up, and Havoc didn't growl. He didn't lunge. He simply shifted his weight backward and turned his body slightly sideways, which was a posture Maya had learned to read as, I am not going to cooperate with this, and I would like that to be clear before anyone does anything they'll regret. Don't approach him, Maya said. He doesn't know you. He's a dog. He's a military working dog with 8 years of active service and a current threat-ready status. She looked at the man. You approach him without my authorization, and anything that happens is on you and your company. The man stepped back. Hale arrived at Yo 558, 2 minutes ahead of the scheduled removal, which meant he'd been close enough to come quickly, which meant he'd been watching. He came out of his vehicle already talking. Caldwell, step away from the animal. Sir, I've formally contested. You've stalled, he said. He walked past Presser without looking at him. You've used a technicality to buy yourself 30 minutes, and you've wasted everyone's time. The legal review provision applies to contested ownership, not handler disagreements. You're not this dog's owner. The Navy is. He stopped 6 feet from her. Step away. He was right about the provision. She'd gambled, and he'd known the rule better than she had. Maya didn't move for a moment. Havoc pressed against her leg. She thought about the Warcom transfer paperwork in her pocket. She thought about Delta 4 classification and a sealed service annotation and a JAG office out of Joint Special Operations. She thought about the half-beat in Hale's eyes when she'd mentioned the training yard footage. She unclipped Havoc's lead from her hand and held it out to Presser, because giving it to Hale directly felt like something she couldn't make herself do. He'll need a wider crate, she said. The one they brought is too small. He won't load into it. Presser took the lead. Havoc looked at her. She didn't look back because if she did, she would not hold together, and she needed to hold together for whatever came next. She walked away from the kennel block with her hands at her sides and her jaw tight, and the October wind off the harbor cutting through every gap in her jacket, and she did not stop walking until she was around the corner of the admin building and out of their line of sight. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed the only number she could think of that might have any reach into what was sealed inside Havoc's file. The line connected on the second ring. Judge Advocate General's office, Little Creek Detachment, said the voice on the other end. How can I direct your call? I need to speak to whoever handles Delta 4 classified K9 service records, Maya said. Her voice was steady. She was slightly surprised by this. My name is Petty Officer Maya Caldwell. I'm calling from Naval Security Base Redstone Harbor. I have information about an active military working dog whose records are sealed at that level, and I believe those records are being used, or rather, deliberately ignored, to justify a fraudulent removal order. A pause. Can you hold? Yes, she said. She stood against the admin building wall with the phone at her ear and the sound of the truck starting up on the gravel lot around the corner, and she held. What she learned in the next 40 minutes, pieced together from a JAG paralegal who could not confirm specifics but could confirm that her call was being escalated, from the intake paperwork in her pocket, from Kwame's confirmation of the Warcom transfer, and from a single piece of information the paralegal let slip before catching herself. A name, one name, attached to the sealed file as a points of contact for next-of-kin notification protocols, which was a category of documentation that covered handlers and, in certain special operations units, the dogs themselves. What she learned was this. Havoc had not been transferred out of Warcom because his mission was complete, or because he'd been injured, or because his handler had rotated out. He'd been transferred because his handler had almost died, and during the evacuation from whatever had almost killed that handler, Havoc had stayed. He'd stayed with wounded personnel in a situation where every protocol said the dog should have been pulled out, and he had not moved until every living person in that situation had been extracted. The details were sealed. The location was sealed. The specific mission was sealed behind 4 levels of classification that Maya's clearance didn't touch. But the name was there. Commander Ethan Collins, USN. SEAL Team 8, currently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Development Group Training Detachment. And below his name, in the field designated for relationship to service animal, primary bond handler, emergency contact authorized. Maya stared at the building wall across the parking lot and understood something that changed the shape of everything she'd been looking at. Hale wasn't just trying to destroy a dog's service record for a contract scheme. I was trying to erase a living witness to something, and the dog's sealed file was the thread that, if pulled, unraveled whatever Hale had built his contractor deal on top of. She needed to pull it. She called Kwame again. I need you to find a contact number for a Commander Ethan Collins, SEAL Team 8, currently attached to Ines Babur DG Training Detachment. Do not go through base channels. A pause. Maya, what is... Kwame. She stopped. I'll explain everything later. Right now I need the number. He was quiet for a moment. Then, give me 20 minutes. It took him 11. And when Maya dialed the number and it rang twice, and then a voice answered, deep, alert, the particular flatness of someone trained to sound calm under any circumstances, she felt the first thing in 3 hours that wasn't dread. "Collins," the voice said. "Commander Collins," Maya said. "My name is Petty Officer Maya Caldwell. I'm a K-9 handler at Naval Security Base Redstone Harbor." She paused. "I think they just took your dog." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. "Where is he?" Collins said. "Coastal Animal Control Facility in Harwick, Virginia. He was transported 40 minutes ago on a fraudulent removal order." She breathed. "They're calling it a safety review. It's not. I have documentation that suggests it's tied to a private contractor scheme, and the officer behind it has deleted the security footage that would clear Havoc completely." Another silence. Shorter this time. "Don't do anything else," Collins said. His voice had changed in a way she couldn't entirely name. Not louder, not harder, but more focused, like a lens that had found its focal point. "Don't approach the facility. Don't contact Hale. Don't file anything through base channels." "Understood. I'll be there by morning." The call ended. Maya stood in the parking lot of Naval Security Base Redstone Harbor with her phone in her hand and the wind off the harbor in her face and the distant sound of the kennel block. Quiet now, no dogs. Because Havoc had been the only active K-9 this week, and now he was gone. She thought about the word morning. She thought about what Hale would do with the hours between now and then. She thought about the too small transport crate and the contractors who didn't know how to approach a working dog. And she thought about Havoc alone in a county animal control facility, in a strange kennel, surrounded by strangers, with no one he recognized anywhere near him. She took a breath. Then she thought about what she still had. The intake paperwork. The metadata Kwame had documented. The JAG call log. The name. And she thought about Hale's half-beat, that single moment of hesitation when she'd mentioned the footage, and she understood that a man who hesitates has something to protect. And a man with something to protect has made a mistake somewhere. She just needed to find it before morning. Inside the now empty kennel block, Crate 7 sat with its door open and a worn fleece mat folded on the floor, and on the chain-link wall above it. Someone, Maya, 14 months ago, in a moment she barely remembered, had zip-tied a small laminated card with Havoc's name on it, and below the name, in her own handwriting, "Trust the dog, he already knows." She found the mistake at 0714. It wasn't where she'd expected it. She'd spent the first hour in the base library's public terminal, pulling every accessible record she could find on the private contractor relationship Kwame had hinted at, searching procurement databases, base contract logs, anything that didn't require clearance above her grade. Most of it was locked or scrubbed clean in the way things get scrubbed when someone with administrative access has been careful. Hale had been careful. But careful people focus their attention on the things they consider threats. And what Hale had apparently not considered a threat was the base facility's maintenance request system, which was publicly accessible to all personnel, which was boring and procedural, and which nobody ever looked at for anything except scheduling HVAC repairs. The request had been filed 6 weeks ago. Building 14C, which housed the Base Security Division's secondary server room. The request was for hardware upgrade and cable management, submitted under Hale's divisional account. Standard language, the kind of thing that disappeared into the administrative background noise of a working military installation. Except the technician assigned to the work order was not a base facilities contractor. The company listed, Vielo Systems Integration, did not appear anywhere in Redstone Harbor's official vendor registry. Maya stared at the screen. Her coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She photographed the maintenance request with her phone, then photographed the vendor registry page showing Vielo Systems Integration absent from the list, then sat back and thought about what a private company's technician would be doing in the Base Security Division's server room. 6 weeks before the training yard footage from Havoc's incident got deleted under a Security Division administrative account. The answer she came to was not a comfortable one. She texted Kwame, "Vielo Systems Integration. Find anything you can. Don't use base network." His response came back in 4 minutes. On it. Also, "You need to know something. Reitz filed a supplemental report this morning. Says the bruising was worse than initially assessed. Hale's office sent it to the base medical officer at 0632. Maya read it twice. They were building the case in real time, layering documentation on top of documentation, which meant they were moving faster than she'd anticipated, and also that someone had told them she'd made the JAG call. The base operator who'd taken the call could have flagged it. The paralegal who'd escalated it could have flagged it. Any number of people in the chain between her 0600 phone call and now could have flagged it. She was running out of time before Collins arrived, and she didn't know exactly what "by morning" meant for a SEAL commander calling from wherever he'd been when she reached him. She needed to buy herself hours. The only currency she had left was the truth, and the only place the truth lived right now was in documents she didn't fully have yet. She called Kwame directly. "Tell me about Vialos." So, he sounded like someone who had spent the last 4 minutes getting progressively more uncomfortable. Vialos Systems Integration is registered in Delaware, incorporated 14 months ago. They list themselves as a defense technology consulting firm. Their public client list is basically nothing. 2 small municipal contracts in Maryland, which look like they exist to make the company look real. A pause. But here's the thing. Their board of directors includes a former naval officer named Raymond Thatch, retired 2 years ago from, and I'm reading this directly, Naval Security Operations, Pacific Theater. Maya was very still. That's Hale's background. Yes, it is. And Thatch's LinkedIn, which, bless these people for keeping LinkedIn profiles, lists his current role as Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at Vialos. And Vialos's main product pitch, buried in their website's government contracting section, is an autonomous perimeter drone surveillance system they call the Sentry Array. Kwame paused. Marketed as a direct replacement for traditional ground-based K-9 security teams. She closed her eyes for a moment. There it was. Not a hunch anymore. Not a theory stitched together from timestamps and transfer records. A company co-founded by a colleague of Hale's, selling a product that required eliminating K-9 units to make market space, with a technician in Hale's server room 6 weeks before evidence went missing. Kwame, I need everything you just told me in writing, not in any base system, your personal email, your personal device. Maya, if this goes sideways, it's already sideways, she said. It went sideways when they took Havoc. I'm just trying to find out how far. A pause. Long enough that she thought he might say no. Okay, he said. I'll document it, but I want it on record that I am deeply unhappy about all of this. Noted. Document that too. She hung up and sat in the library for another 10 minutes, thinking. Then she got up and walked to the one place on base she hadn't been yet and should have gone first, which was the office of Master Chief Petty Officer Doris Yarrow, who was the senior enlisted advisor for base security and who had been at Redstone Harbor for 11 years, and who was, by reputation, the kind of woman who did not particularly care what rank you held if she thought you were doing something wrong. But Master Chief Yarrow was 61 years old and had the build of someone who had stopped caring about appearing physically intimidating around the time she'd realized she was naturally intimidating regardless. She was behind her desk when Maya arrived, reading something on paper. She was one of the last people Maya knew who consistently printed documents rather than reading them on screen, which she'd once explained by saying, "I think better when I can cross things out." She looked up when Maya came in and said nothing, just looked, which was itself a form of communication. Master Chief, Maya closed the door behind her. I need to tell you something that may create a problem for you, and I want you to know up front that you can ask me to leave, and I will. Yarrow put down her papers. Sit. Maya sat and talked for 11 minutes without stopping. She laid out everything in order. The removal order, the metadata, the deleted footage, Vialos systems, the Warcom transfer paperwork, the JAG call, Collins. She put her phone on Yarrow's desk and showed her the photographs. She kept her voice level and her language precise, and she did not editorialize because Yarrow was not a woman who responded well to editorializing. When she finished, Yarrow was quiet for a moment. The JAG call, she said. You made it from your personal cell? Yes. And the commander, Collins, he's coming here. He said by morning. That was approximately 2 hours ago. Yarrow looked at the photographs. She looked at the maintenance request. She looked at the Vialos information Kwame had texted while Maya had been walking to the building. You know what you're accusing Hale of, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Master Chief. And you know what happens to you if you're wrong. Yes, Master Chief. Jero leaned back in her chair. It made a sound. She looked at the ceiling for a moment and then looked back at Maya with the expression of someone who has done a calculation they were not expecting to enjoy. The training yard incident report. Who signed off on the medical assessment? The base medical officer, Dr. Priel. Priel has been here 4 months. Jero picked up her desk phone. I'm going to make a call. You're going to sit there and not say anything. She dialed an internal extension. Dr. Priel, this is Master Chief Jero. I need you to pull the original medical assessment from the Reitz incident, the one filed 3 days ago, not the supplemental from this morning. I need to know if you wrote it or if it came to you pre-drafted. A pause. Yes, I'll hold. She held for 90 seconds. Her face didn't change. I see, she said when Priel came back. And the supplemental filed this morning, same question. Another pause. Shorter. Thank you, doctor. Please don't discuss this call. She hung up. She looked at Maya. The original assessment was submitted to Priel's system pre-drafted. He added his signature, assumed it was standard processing. The supplemental this morning arrived the same way. Maya had suspected it. Hearing it confirmed still hit differently. Both documents came from the Security Division admin queue, Jero said, which is Hale's. Yes. He manufactured both reports. Yes. Jero stood up. She was not a tall woman, but standing up seemed to add something to her. I'm going to tell you what I can and can't do. I can pull the kennel block security logs from last night's shift and hold them outside the base digital system, because I have that authority. I can request a hold on any further processing of Havoc's case through animal control pending an internal review, because I have that authority too. What I cannot do is make Hale stand still, and what I cannot do is stop him from moving pieces before your commander arrives. I understand. Does Hale know Collins is coming? I don't know, Maya said. I made the call from my personal phone, but if someone in JAG flagged my inquiry up through channels, he could know. Jero's jaw was tight. If he knows, he'll try to get the dog moved or processed before Collins can establish a legal claim to the animal. She looked at the wall for a moment, which seemed to be how she thought. Havoc County Animal Control. I have a contact there, former Navy. I'm going to make another call. Master Chief? Maya stopped. Why are you helping me? Jero looked at her with an expression that was not quite surprise and not quite impatience, but somewhere between. Because 11 years ago I watched a good officer get railroaded by a procurement scheme that looked exactly like this, and I signed the document I was told to sign, and I have thought about it every single day since. She picked up her desk phone again. Now stop asking me questions and let me work. Hush. The call to Havoc County Animal Control took 6 minutes. Jero's contact there, a man named Ferris who had apparently served with her in Okinawa and who owed her something significant that neither of them referenced directly, confirmed that Havoc had arrived at 0720, that he was kenneled in the large dog intake area, that he had not eaten the food they'd offered him, and that he had, in Ferris's words, not made a single sound but looks at the door every 30 seconds like he's timing something. That last part landed in Maya's chest in a way she couldn't entirely account for. Ferris also confirmed that at 0930, he'd received a call from a civilian number requesting information about expedited transfer of a specific intake animal to a private veterinary assessment facility in Richmond. He had told the caller that transfers required the originating agency's authorization. The caller had said they would provide that authorization and called back 20 minutes later. The second call had come from a Redstone Harbor Security Division number. Hale was moving to get Havoc out of Harwick before Collins arrived. Get him into a private facility, somewhere with different paperwork chains, different jurisdictions, different rules about who could claim an animal. Jero had Ferris put an administrative hold on the transfer, an internal Harwick procedure for contested intake animals that he had legitimate authority to invoke. It would last 24 hours, maybe 30. That buys us until tomorrow morning at the outside, Jero said. She was writing something. What time did you say Collins is arriving? He said by morning. He didn't specify. So sometime between now and 0600 tomorrow. She checked the clock. It was 0902. They had potentially 21 hours, probably less. What else do you have that I don't have yet? Maya thought about it. The sealed service record. Delta 4. I can't access it, and neither can you. But Collins can. And whatever's in it, whatever Havoc did in that mission, I think that's what makes Hale's whole scheme structurally vulnerable. Because if Havoc has special operations commendation history that's been deliberately suppressed in the removal documentation, that's not just fraud. That's falsification of military records at a federal level. Yarrow looked at her. You know that for certain? I know enough to believe it. The rest is in the file. Yarrow folded her hands on the desk. We wait for Collins. We hold what we have. We don't approach Hale, don't contact the base CO, who I do not fully trust given how quickly Hale's orders got executed this morning, and we keep Ferris cooperative until the hold runs out. And if Hale finds another way to move Havoc before Collins arrives? Yarrow's expression did something that was almost not a smile. Then we find out how creative we can get. She pushed back from her desk. In the meantime, I want you out of visible areas. Hale doesn't know how much you have, but he knows you made noise this morning. Visible means targetable. Where should I be? Maintenance Annex, Building 9. There's a break room in the back that nobody uses because the coffee machine sounds like it's dying. Take your documentation, keep your phone on, and wait. The break room in Building 9's Maintenance Annex had a window that faced the harbor, which was something, and a coffee machine that did in fact sound like it was dying, which was accurate. Maya sat at the single plastic table with her phone's notes app open and wrote down everything she knew in order, time-stamped, with cross-references to the photographs she'd taken. She did this because writing things down made them real in a way that thinking about them did not. And because if something happened to her in the next 21 hours, she wanted there to be a record that somebody else could follow. She wrote for 40 minutes. Then she sat and looked at the harbor and thought about Havoc looking at a kennel door every 30 seconds. She texted Collins. They're trying to transfer him to a private facility in Richmond before you arrive. We have an administrative hold through Harwick County that buys us roughly 24 hours. Hale is moving fast. The response came back in under 2 minutes. Understood. Accelerating, that was all. She put her phone face down on the table and breathed. At 11:40, Kwame texted her something that made her stand up so fast she knocked over her dead coffee. Found something. Velos filed a government contracting proposal with DoD 4 months ago. The proposal includes a projected timeline for K-9 program phase-out at 6 naval installations. Redstone Harbor is listed as Phase 1 pilot site. The projected completion date for Phase 1, November 1st, 12 days from today. This wasn't a scheme in progress. It was a scheme in its final stage. Hale wasn't just removing Havoc. He was clearing the last obstacle to a contract that had already been written, already been submitted, and was already waiting on Redstone Harbor's K-9 program to officially cease operations. Maya called Kwame. The proposal? Is it publicly accessible? It's in the DoD contracting database under a provisional review status. Technically public record. I found it through the Velos registration number. He paused. Maya, the proposal has Hale's name on it as a program implementation consultant. He's named in the contractor documents. A conflict of interest so large it was basically structural. Send me the page numbers and the database entry ID, she said. I need to be able to pull it myself. He sent them. She pulled it on her phone, screenshot every relevant page, and then sat there with the specific feeling of someone who has just watched a puzzle complete itself into a picture worse than expected. Hale wasn't going to stop at Havoc. He had never planned to stop at Havoc. Havoc was Phase 1 because Havoc was the most decorated, the most visible, the dog whose removal would be contested, and winning that contest would establish precedent for every K-9 removal that followed. If he could eliminate Havoc's service record, manufacture cause, and get it done before anyone with enough pull to fight it noticed, the rest would follow like dominoes. Maya was in the middle of forwarding the screenshots to Yarrow when her phone rang. Unknown number, Virginia area code. She answered it. Petty Officer Caldwell. The voice was male, mid-register, very controlled. Not a voice she recognized. My name isn't important. What's important is that I know what you've been doing this morning, and I want to give you an opportunity to stop before this gets complicated for you. She didn't speak for a moment. Her heart was doing something unpleasant. Who is this? She said. Someone who's trying to help you make a smart decision. You've made some inquiries today that have attracted attention. The JAG call, the facilities request search, the Yarrow meeting. A pause. The animal is gone, Petty Officer. This is over. If you file anything, contest anything further, or continue communicating with outside parties, the supplemental medical report and the original incident documentation will be used to initiate a formal review of your own service record. Gross negligence and canine oversight, failure to control an aggressive military working dog. Maya looked at the harbor out the window. The water was gray-green and the wind was still pulling whitecaps off the surface. "You're threatening me," she said. "I'm offering you the chance to walk away with your career intact." On behalf of who? The pause that followed was fractionally too long. "That doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "Caldwell?" The voice dropped half a register. "You're a petty officer at a mid-tier security installation. You have 11 months at this base, no commendations, one letter of concern on your file from 8 months ago. You are not equipped for this fight." She thought about what to say and decided on the truth. Because the truth was also the version most likely to make whoever was listening, and someone was listening, she was certain, understand the situation they were actually in. "Commander Ethan Collins is on his way here," she said. "He'll be here by morning. When he arrives, he'll have access to Havoc's sealed Delta IV service record, which I believe documents a special operations mission in which Havoc performed actions that make the fabricated removal documentation not just fraudulent, but federally criminal." She paused. "So I think your window for this conversation was a few hours ago." Silence. "Who told you about Collins?" The control in the voice had frayed just slightly. "The same record that names him as emergency contact," she said, "which is publicly accessible to any canine handler through the Military Working Dog Registry, which is exactly how I accessed it, which means this information is going to be available to anyone who looks." She let that sit for a second. "I'd suggest you use whatever time you have left to think about how you'd like to explain your involvement to NCIS, because that's where this goes next." She ended the call. Her hands were not entirely steady when she put the phone down on the plastic table. She sat there for approximately 4 seconds being genuinely frightened, which was the honest response to what had just happened, and she allowed it because denying it would have been stupid. Someone in Hale's orbit had her phone number, had been monitoring her movements closely enough to know about the Yarrow meeting, was connected enough to make threats with specifics. Then she forwarded the unknown number to Yarrow with a single text. "Just received a call. Recording incoming. I didn't have time to start it, but this is the number." Yarrow responded in 60 seconds. "Stay where you are." The harbor outside the window went on doing what harbors do, indifferent and ongoing. At 13:47, her phone buzzed with the text from Collins. "ETA 0430 tomorrow. Don't move the dog." She texted back, working on it, and then, because there was nothing left to do but wait, and because waiting was the hardest thing, she opened her notes app and read back through everything she'd written and tried to find the gap, the thing she'd missed, the angle Hale still had that could make this worse. She found it 17 minutes later, buried in the Vielos contracting proposal that Kwame had sent her. In the section titled Phase 1 Implementation Contingencies, under a subsection labeled Regulatory Compliance Measures, there was a single line that she'd passed over the first time because it read like standard legal boilerplate. It was not standard legal boilerplate. It read, "All animals removed during Phase 1 will be transferred to contracted veterinary assessment facilities. Animals failing assessment criteria will be processed under standard military working dog retirement protocols, Section 12B. Section 12B of Military Working Dog Retirement Protocols was the provision for euthanasia. Harwick County's administrative hold was good for 24 hours, maybe 30. The transfer request to the Richmond facility had already been made. If it went through, Havoc would go into Vielos's contracted assessment system, where the assessment criteria were written by Vielos, where Section 12B was the backup plan, and where a SEAL commander's emergency contact status in a sealed file would be as useful as a note in a language nobody at that facility was authorized to read. Collins was arriving at 0430. The hold ran out sometime around 0700. There was a gap, and Hale, who had been 3 steps ahead of her all morning, had almost certainly known about the gap from the beginning. Maya called Yarrow at 1412 and didn't waste time on preamble. Section 12B, she said. Vielos's contracted assessment facilities. If the transfer to Richmond goes through before Collins arrives, Havoc goes into their system, and their system has a built-in pathway to euthanasia that operates outside standard military working dog protocols. Yarrow was quiet for 3 seconds. How far out is Collins? 0430. And the Havoc hold? Ferris said 24 hours from intake, which was 0720 this morning, so 0720 tomorrow. But if Hale's people push the Richmond transfer through tonight, Ferris may not be able to hold it past the authorization. Another pause. Ferris can delay processing, Yarrow said, but he can't refuse a legitimate transfer order indefinitely, not without grounds. What counts as grounds? Active federal inquiry, NCIS involvement, a court order. Yarrow stopped. Or a direct intervention from a commanding officer with documented claim to the animal. Collins has emergency contact status in the sealed record. That's not a command authority. That's a next of kin notation. Yarrow's voice was careful, working through it in real time. For it to function as an intervention, someone with JAG authority would need to access the sealed record and confirm what it contains, and then the emergency contact status would need to be formally invoked through the military working dog registry. A pause. That's a 4-hour process minimum. On a normal day, through normal channels. The gap was not closing, it was widening. The JAG paralegal I spoke to this morning, Maya said. She escalated my call. Someone received that escalation. If that person has access to Delta 4 records, do you have a name? No? She stopped herself before she gave it. Then we're working blind on that side. Yarrow breathed out slowly. Caldwell. The most direct solution is Collins arriving before the transfer authorization clears. Everything else is managing time. Can he move faster? He said 0430, and then he said he was accelerating. Text him the Section 12B issue. Specifically, he needs to know what he's racing. Maya was already typing it as Yarrow spoke. She sent it and watched the screen for a response that didn't come immediately. In the meantime, Yarrow said, I'm going to contact the base JAG officer. Not about the sealed record, I don't have standing for that, but about the manufactured incident reports. Priel has already confirmed they came to him pre-drafted. That's enough to open a formal inquiry into the documentation, and a formal inquiry creates grounds for Ferris to hold the transfer pending review. How long will that take? Depends on who I reach and how fast they move. Yarrow's voice had the particular flatness of someone who has done this kind of calculation before and knows it often goes badly. Start praying the JAG officer isn't one of Hale's people. She hung up. Maya stared at the harbor. Collins texted back at 1431. Aware. Moving up timeline. 0200 if roads hold, 2 in the morning. That cut the gap from 90 minutes to 4.5 hours of overlap, assuming the Havoc hold lasted to 0720. It was something. It was not enough if Hale found a way to push the Richmond transfer through before midnight. At 15:08, Kwame sent a text that changed the shape of the afternoon. Hale left base at 1450. Personal vehicle. Didn't sign out through normal channels. Adjutant says he's at an off-site meeting. No details. Maya read it 3 times. Hale leaving base was either completely routine or the opposite. She didn't know him well enough to know which, and that uncertainty was its own kind of pressure. He could be meeting with Vielos. He could be accelerating the Richmond paperwork. He could be doing something she hadn't anticipated because she'd been focused on the moves she could see and he had moves she couldn't. She forwarded it to Yarrow. Hale left base 1450. Off-site, no details. Yarrow's response was immediate. Noted. JAG inquiry filed at 1:55. Officer assigned is Lieutenant Grayson Mack. He's reviewing. Don't know him. Lieutenant Mack was an unknown quantity. Unknown quantities were not what Maya needed right now. She sat in the maintenance annex break room with the dying coffee machine grumbling beside her and thought about what she could control and what she couldn't. She could not control Hale's off-site meeting. She could not control Mack's timeline. She could not control the Richmond facility's paperwork processing speed. She could control what she did with the next several hours. She opened her phone and looked at the Vielos contracting proposal again. She'd been reading it as evidence, looking for what it proved about Hale. She hadn't been reading it as an operational document. She started reading it that way now. The Phase 1 implementation timeline was specific. November 1st completion. That meant Hale needed the K9 program at Redstone Harbor to be officially non-operational in 12 days. A single dog removal, even successfully completed, didn't accomplish that. He'd need the program shut down administratively, which required the base CO's signature on a program suspension order. She went back through the base procurement logs, this time looking for a different kind of document. She found it at 1537, a program suspension proposal, drafted 6 weeks ago, sitting in the base CO's administrative queue under the heading K9 Operational Efficiency Review. It had not yet been signed. The CO's scheduler showed a meeting block for next week, Thursday at 1400, labeled Security Division Program Brief. Hale was planning to get the CO's signature at that meeting. He was 9 days away from officially killing the entire K9 program. Havoc was Phase 1, but the meeting was the endgame. She photographed everything and sent it to Yarrow with a single line. He's going for the CO's signature next Thursday. This is bigger than one dog. She was waiting for Yarrow's response when the door to the break room opened. She had approximately 1 second to process that nobody except Yarrow and Kwame knew she was here before the person in the doorway resolved into someone she recognized, Lieutenant Presser, Hale's adjutant. The young one from this morning, the one who'd looked like he didn't fully understand his assignment. He looked different now, not more confident, more troubled. He glanced behind him before he came fully into the room, which told her several things at once. Caldwell. He kept his voice low. I have about 4 minutes before I need to be back in the office. How did you find me? Master Chief Yarrow's aide mentioned Building 9 to someone in passing. It's a base. Things travel. He stopped just inside the door. He was maybe 25 years old. He had the look of someone who had joined the military for reasons that had made sense at the time. The Richmond transfer authorization. It's on Hale's desk right now. Maya went very still. When does he sign it? I don't know when he's back, but when he comes back, it's the first thing on his desk. Presser looked at her. I typed the authorization myself. He dictated it. He stopped. I didn't know what it meant when I typed it. I typed it because I was told to. But then I heard you this morning, the legal provision you cited, and I looked it up, and then I looked up what the Richmond facility actually is, and Presser. She said his name to stop the spiral. What are you telling me? He pulled a folded paper from inside his jacket. He held it out. She took it. The original incident report. Before Hale's version, Reitz gave me a draft to file 3 days ago. The real one, 2 sentences, said it was his fault and there was no injury. I filed it. Hale's office deleted it from the system the next morning and submitted the replacement, but I kept my copy. He nodded at the paper. The timestamp on it proves the replacement was filed afterward. Maya looked at the paper. It was a printout of the original email from Reitz, time-stamped, with Reitz's base email address in the sender field. Exactly what she'd needed and hadn't been able to get from the system because the system had been scrubbed. Why are you doing this? She said. Presser looked at her with the expression of someone who has run the calculation and found they don't like the number. Because I'm the one who typed it. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Get it to whoever needs it. He moved to the door. If Hale asks, I was never here. He left. The door closed. Maya sat for exactly 2 seconds and then called Yarrow. Otet. The original Reitz email went to Lieutenant Mack at 6601. Yarrow hand-delivered a printed copy to the JAG office on the grounds that digital systems at this installation had already demonstrated a vulnerability to unauthorized modification, a statement that was both accurate and the kind of thing that made JAG officers uncomfortable in productive ways. Mack called Yarrow at 1644. Maya wasn't in that conversation, but Yarrow texted her the summary. Mack opening formal investigation. Grounds. Documentation tampering. He's issuing a hold request to Harwick County directly. JAG authority, not just administrative. Different weight, Ferris can hold until the investigation closes. That was better. That was meaningfully better. But Hale was still off-site, and the Richmond authorization was still on his desk. At 1719, Kwame sent a photograph. He'd walked past Hale's office window, casually, he specified, just walking past, and taken it through the glass. The photograph showed Hale's desk. The Richmond transfer authorization was visible in the upper right corner of the desk surface, and standing beside the desk, looking at something on the desk's computer screen, was a man in civilian clothes Maya didn't recognize. She sent the photograph to Yarrow. Who is this? Yarrow's response took 9 minutes. Raymond Thatch, Velo Systems. He's in Hale's office. Thatch. The former naval officer on Velos's board, named in the contracting proposal. At this installation, in Hale's office, while Hale was supposedly at an off-site meeting, Hale wasn't off-site. Or he was off-site and Thatch had a key to his office, which was arguably worse. Maya called Yarrow directly. Thatch is in there alone. I see it. If he's accessing the base system through Hale's computer, I know.
Was already moving. She could hear it in her voice, the particular quality of motion.
I'm going to the security division. I have legitimate reason to be there. What reason? I'll think of one on the way. A pause. Stay in building 9. Yarrow. Stay, Caldwell. You're not the right person to walk into that room. I am. She was right. Maya stayed. The next 22 minutes were the longest of the day. She sat with her phone and watched the screen and drank the terrible coffee because doing something with her hands was better than doing nothing. Yarrow texted at 17:48. Thatch gone. He left before I got there. Hale's computer was locked. No way to know what was accessed. Then, but the Richmond authorization is not on the desk anymore. Maya read that twice. The authorization was gone, which meant either Thatch had taken it or Hale had been there briefly without anyone noticing and taken it himself. Either way, the clock had just changed and she didn't know the new time. She texted Collins. Authorization may have moved. Can you confirm 0200? He responded in under a minute. On track. What changed? She typed out the summary. Thatch. The authorization. The unknown. Collins's response was 4 words. Hold the line, Caldwell. She held it. Up. At 21:05, the base settled into its night rhythms. The reduced personnel hum of a security installation after dark. Fewer vehicles, fewer people. The particular quiet that made sounds carry farther. Maya had moved from the break room to the kennel block at 20:30, which Yarrow had unlocked for her with the stated reason of routine handler check. It was not a routine handler check, but it was a reason that fit on paper. She sat in the kennel block because it was the only place on base that felt like it had any logic to it right now. The other dogs, 2 of them, both belonging to handlers who were on leave, were quiet. Crate 7 was still empty and still had its door open and still had the zip-tied laminated card above it. She was looking at the card when her phone rang. Unknown number again, same area code as the morning call. She answered it. You sent Presser's document to JAG. Not a question. Same voice as before, but the control was gone from it now. What was left underneath was not the voice of someone managing a situation. It was the voice of someone watching a situation get away from them. That's obstruction of a security division administrative process. The document was given to me voluntarily by the person who created it, Maya said. That's not obstruction. That's evidence. You need to understand something. The voice dropped. The Richmond authorization has been co-signed by a civilian contractor under DoD procurement emergency provisions. That provision allows for bypass of standard base administrative review. The transfer will go through regardless of your JAG inquiry. Maya's mouth went dry. She kept her voice even. Emergency procurement provisions require a specific threat designation. What threat did you file? A pause. What threat? She said again. K9 unit liability risk to base personnel. The answer came back flat and fast, which meant it had been prepared. The animal has a documented aggression history. Emergency removal is authorized under base safety protocols when an animal poses ongoing risk to service members. She thought quickly. The supplemental REITs report. The enhanced injury documentation. They hadn't just been building a paper trail for the removal order. They'd been constructing the specific language required to invoke emergency procurement provisions. This had been the plan beneath the plan. Where is the transfer happening? She said. That's not your concern. When? Silence. Then, Caldwell, you are a petty officer. You are out of options and out of allies, and the right decision. She hung up. She called Ferris at Harwick County. He answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been awake and waiting. I know, he said before she could speak. I got the same call 20 minutes ago. Emergency procurement provision, DoD procurement code 7 alpha. If it's valid, I have to release the animal. Is it valid? I've got a fax coming in right now with the authorization number. She could hear paper moving. It looks valid. The format is right. The code checks out in the Federal Registry. Ferris! She stopped. JAG Lieutenant Mack issued a hold request on Hale's documentation. Does the emergency provision override a JAG hold? A pause. I'd have to check. She could hear him breathing. The JAG hold is on the incident documentation. The emergency provision isn't invoking the incident, it's invoking safety risk. Those are different regulatory tracks. Different tracks. Hale had built a bypass for the bypass. He'd anticipated the JAG inquiry and constructed an alternative legal pathway that ran around it entirely. How long to verify the emergency provision? Maya said. Standard verification is 24 hours. But if the authorization number checks out on first pass, I'm supposed to process the transfer within 6 hours of receipt. She looked at the clock on her phone. 127. 6 hours from receipt of the fax, assuming it had just come in, put the transfer processing window at somewhere between 0300 and 0400. Collins was arriving at 0200. It was close enough to make her stomach tighten. Ferris, she measured her words. I need you to run the full 24-hour verification. Every step, by the book, no shortcuts. Can you justify that? I can justify it if I have questions about the authorization's chain of custody, which… He paused. I might have questions. The fax number it came from is a civilian number, not a DoD relay. Document that question, Maya said. Document everything, every step, every timestamp. Already started, he said. Maya, what's coming? Someone who can end this. He needs until 0200. Ferris was quiet for a moment. I'll do what I can with what I've got. She hung up and texted Collins the new information. The response came back in 90 seconds. Moving up again. Do not let that transfer clear. At 22:30, Yarrow arrived at the kennel block with 2 cups of coffee from somewhere that wasn't the base cafeteria and sat across from Maya at the handler's desk. She put 1 cup in front of Maya and held the other with both hands. Mac is working on a counter to the emergency provision, she said. He found a procedural issue with the threat designation. The emergency authorization requires a base medical officer to certify the ongoing risk, and Priel won't certify it. He's already told Mac's office he won't sign anything further related to this case. She paused. Hale's team filed the threat designation without Priel's signature. That's a procedural defect. Mac is building an argument that the defect invalidates the emergency provision. How long? He's drafting now. He said 2 hours, maybe 3. The transfer window opens at 0300. Yarrow looked at her over her coffee. I know. They sat with that. What happens if Collins gets here and the transfer has already cleared? Maya said. Yarrow's jaw moved. Then he goes to Richmond. Ferris called. I've got a follow-up fax. From a DoD relay number this time. They corrected the chain of custody issue. The authorization looks clean now. Maya looked at Yarrow. Yarrow looked at the wall. What's your verification timeline at this point? Maya said. If the number checks out on second pass, I'm looking at a 3-hour processing window, maybe less. A pause. I'm sorry. I've slowed this down as much as I legitimately can. I know. Thank you, Ferris. She hung up and checked the time. 23:41. Collins had said 0200, then accelerating. She did not know what accelerating meant in practical terms for a man driving from wherever he'd been. She did not know if 0200 was still the number, or if the number had changed again, and he was simply too focused on driving to text her. She texted him. Verification window closing. Transfer could clear by 0300. Where are you? The response took 4 minutes, which was longer than his previous responses had taken, and the 4 minutes were not comfortable. 90 minutes out, driving, 0141, roughly. If the transfer cleared at 0300, he had 19 minutes of overlap. 19 minutes was not nothing. It was also very close to nothing. Yarrow read the exchange over Maya's shoulder. She put her empty coffee cup on the handler's desk. I'm going to the main gate, she said. Why? Because when he arrives, I want him processed through in under 2 minutes, and that doesn't happen without someone standing at the gate who has the authority to make it happen. She pulled on her jacket. You stay here. You keep Ferris on the phone if you can. If the transfer clears, I need to know the second it clears. She left. The kennel block went, except for the 2 other dogs shifting in their crates, and the harbor wind pressing against the walls, and the small particular silence of crate 7 with its door still open. Maya sat down on the floor in front of it. She put her back against the metal frame of the neighboring crate and stretched her legs out and looked at the laminated card and tried to think if there was anything left that she hadn't done. She didn't think there was. She had done everything she could do from the position she occupied with the resources she had in the hours available. She had found Presser's document and gotten it to Mac. She had found the Velos proposal and gotten it to Yarrow. She had found Collins's name in a file nobody had told her existed and made a phone call that had put a SEAL commander on a highway at midnight. She had held the line the way he'd told her to. Now she waited, which was the one thing she was genuinely bad at. She was still sitting on the floor when her phone rang at 0047 and the number was Kwame's. "I'm sorry to call this late," he said, and his voice had something in it she hadn't heard from him before. Not fear exactly, but the close neighbor of it. "Something happened and I didn't know if it could wait. Tell me." "I went home at 2200, standard, but I left a monitoring script running on the public procurement database. Nothing classified, just watching for updates to the Velos proposal entry. It pinged me 20 minutes ago." A pause. The proposal status changed. It moved from provisional review to approved pending implementation. Maya stood up. "That requires a DoD contracting office signature." "Yes, and the signature timestamp is 2031 tonight, while Hale was supposedly off-site." Another pause. "Maya, the approval came through a contracting office in the Pentagon's acquisition division. Someone at that level signed off on Velos's proposal tonight, which means the K-9 program phase-out at Redstone Harbor isn't just planned anymore. It's federally approved." She stood very still in the middle of the kennel block. The dogs in their crates didn't move. Hale hadn't been at an off-site meeting in any casual sense. He'd been moving the entire structure forward on every front simultaneously: the Richmond transfer, the emergency procurement provision, and the DoD contracting approval, while she and Yarrow had been focused on the Harwick hold and the JAG procedural defect. He'd been running 4 moves at once, and she'd been watching 3 of them. "Kwame," she said, "the Pentagon contracting office. Can you find a name on the approval signature?" "I've been trying. The signature field shows an acquisition division code, not a name. I'd need internal access. I don't have to get the individual." "Send me everything you have. The timestamp, the approval code, the proposal entry ID." He sent it. She looked at it and thought about what a federal contracting approval meant in practical terms. It meant Hale's scheme was no longer a security division fraud case at a mid-tier naval installation. It was a federal procurement fraud case with a Pentagon-level co-conspirator, which made it significantly worse for everyone Hale had pulled into this, and it also meant the magnitude of what he stood to lose if Collins arrived with a sealed Delta IV file and a NCIS referral was much larger than she'd understood this morning. A man with that much to lose did not become more cautious. He became more dangerous. She called Yarrow and gave her Kwame's information in 60 seconds flat. Yarrow was quiet for a moment. "Pentagon Acquisition Division," she said. "Yes. That's above NCIS jurisdiction. That's FBI." "I know. Mac needs this." She was already moving again. Maya could hear it. "This changes the scope of what he's filing. If he can get the Norfolk JAG office to countersign on federal procurement fraud grounds, rather than just base-level documentation tampering, the authority level of the hold changes completely." "How long?" "I don't know. I'm calling him now. Where's Collins?" Maya checked. No new text. She did the math. "Maybe 60 minutes. Hold Ferris." She called Ferris at 0103. He answered immediately, which confirmed he hadn't slept. "The verification," she said. "Where are you in it?" "Second pass check is complete. Authorization number is valid in the Federal Registry. I'm at the point where I'm supposed to initiate transfer coordination." He stopped. "Maya, I've stretched this as far as the procedure allows. If I don't initiate contact with the Richmond facility in the next 30 minutes, I'm in violation of the handling protocol for an authorized emergency transfer." "I understand." She thought fast. The emergency authorization, it was filed under K-9 unit liability risk to base personnel. That's the specific threat designation. "Yes." The base medical officer refused to certify the ongoing risk. Mac has documentation of that refusal. If the threat designation was filed without the required medical certification, the emergency authorization is procedurally defective, regardless of whether the authorization number checks out in the Federal Registry. A pause. I'd need that in writing. Officially, from Jag. It's coming. I need 30 more minutes. Ferris exhaled slowly. 30 minutes. And then I have to go by the book, Maya. I can't lose my position over this. 30 minutes. She hung up and called Yarrow. Mac needs to get the medical certification defect argument to Ferris in writing in the next 30 minutes. Yarrow said something that was not a word but conveyed a complete thought and hung up. The kennel block clock read 0108. Maya sat down again because standing was burning energy she didn't have. She put her phone on her knee and watched the screen and listened to the harbor wind and the dogs breathing and the structural sounds of a building at night. At 019, she got a text from an unfamiliar number with a 757 area code, Norfolk, that said, Mac gave me your number. Norfolk. JAG duty officer. Countersignature filed. Medical certification defect argument transmitted to Harwick County Animal Control Administrative System at 0117. Formal hold in place pending federal procurement fraud investigation. Ferris has it. She read it twice to make sure she'd read it correctly. Then she called Ferris. I got it, he said before she could speak. His voice had something in it that sounded like relief and also like a man who had been awake for 20 hours. Federal hold. I can't touch the transfer until the investigation closes. A pause. He's fine, Maya. He ate some of the food about an hour ago. Not all of it, but some. She put the phone down on her knee and looked at the ceiling. He'd eaten. Not all of it. Some. It was such a small and ordinary fact that she almost laughed, except that laughing would have required more of her than she had at 0121 in the morning. She texted Collins. Hold secured. Ferris confirmed. Take your time. He responded, 20 minutes. Don't leave the gate area. Well, she didn't see him arrive. She heard it. She'd moved to the area outside the kennel block at 0135, standing in the cold with her jacket zipped and the harbor smell sharp in the air, when the sound came. Not a crash, not the dramatic gate breach she'd half imagined from his Part 3 outline in her head, but the unmistakable sound of a large vehicle moving through a base access checkpoint at a speed that suggested the driver had both authorization and intent and was not treating them as separate things. The black SUV came around the corner of the admin building with its headlights cutting the dark and pulled up in a way that was not reckless but was also not casual. It stopped. The engine didn't. The man who got out was not what she'd built in her head from the name and the file notation and the forward text messages. She'd constructed something harder-edged, more deliberate in its presentation. What she got instead was a man who moved like someone whose body had been through things it remembered in its own language. Not graceless, but careful in the specific way of people who have learned that movement has consequences. He was maybe 40, dark-haired, going gray at the temples, in civilian clothes that looked like they'd been pulled on in the dark, which they probably had. He looked at her. Caldwell. Yes, sir? He glanced around the area. A quick automatic scan, the kind that wasn't conscious anymore. He's at Harwick. Yes, federal hold is in place. He's not going anywhere tonight. Collins nodded once. Something in his face moved and then steadied. You've been up all night. Yes, sir. So have I. He looked at the kennel block door. Show me where he lives. She walked him inside. He went to crate 7 the way he would have gone to a specific address in a city he'd visited before. No searching, no hesitation, directly. He crouched in front of the open door and looked at the mat and the laminated card above it for a moment without speaking. 8 years, he said. It wasn't directed at her. It was the particular tone of a person doing arithmetic that doesn't come out to a comfortable number. His intake paperwork listed Warcom K9 support, Maya said. I couldn't access the sealed record, but I found his transfer origin. Little Creek? Yeah. Collins straightened. He was taller standing than he'd looked getting out of the vehicle. I need to know everything you have, all of it, in order. They sat at the handler's desk and she walked him through it. She had it organized by then. The timestamps, the photographs, the Vilos documentation, Kwame's evidence, Presser's original REIT's email, the maintenance request with the Velos technician, the Pentagon approval code, the phone calls. She put her phone on the desk and let him scroll through the photographs himself. He did it methodically, which she'd expected, and he asked 2 questions during the entire briefing, both of which were specific and neither of which were about the broad strokes because he'd absorbed the broad strokes immediately and moved to what he needed to verify. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The sealed record," he said. "You need to understand what's in it because it's relevant to what happens next." He looked at her directly. 4 years ago, Havoc was part of a direct action mission in a location I'm not going to name. The mission went bad in the exfiltration phase. We had 3 wounded, 1 critical, and a hostile force that had cut off our primary extract route. He paused. Havoc held a position for 47 minutes between our wounded and a pursuing element. Alone. His handler, a SEAL named Torres, was one of the 3 wounded. Torres didn't make it. Havoc stayed with him until the secondary extract came in. Maya didn't say anything. Torres named Havoc in his last communication with the team, said he was still there, still working. Collins looked at the open crate. "The record is sealed because the mission is sealed. But what it says specifically is that Havoc's actions during those 47 minutes were directly responsible for preventing at least 2 additional KIA. He paused. "One of those 2 was me." The kennel block was very quiet. "Hale's removal documentation," Maya said carefully, "describes Havoc as a liability, aggressive, unfit for service." "I know what it describes." Collins's voice was level. "That's why I'm here." He stood up. "I need to reach NCIS, tonight." Master Chief Yarrow has been in contact with Lieutenant Mack at JAG. The Norfolk office countersigned the federal hold. If you go through Mack, he can connect you directly to... I don't need Mack for NCIS. He was already pulling out his own phone. "I have a direct contact. We've worked together before." He dialed and moved toward the kennel block door, stepping outside. She heard his voice through the wall. Quiet, clipped, the rhythm of someone delivering information to someone who already understood the format. He came back in 4 minutes later. 2 agents are driving from the Norfolk field office. ETA approximately 2 hours. He put his phone in his pocket. "In the meantime, I need to access the sealed record through a secure terminal. Is there a SCIF on this base?" "Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility." "Yes." "Building 3. It requires senior officer access." "Yarrow," he said. "She's at the main gate." He called her. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Then, "She's meeting us there." The SCIF in Building 3 was a room that looked from outside like any other administrative office, and from inside like the inside of a vault that had been furnished with fluorescent lights and institutional carpet. Yarrow had the access code. Collins had the credentials to pull the sealed record through the JWX terminal, which was the classified network that sat entirely separate from everything Hale had been able to reach. Maya was not cleared for SCIF access at this level, and she knew it. She said so. Collins looked at her. Then he looked at Yarrow. "Handler of record," Yarrow said. 14 months. She found the Warcom transfer notation without any guidance, and she ran this entire night on her own initiative. If anyone has standing to be in this room for this reason, she does. Collins looked at Maya. "I can't give you clearance you don't have, but I can tell you that if you're in this room and you don't see anything on the classified network, and you only hear me describe what I'm accessing, there's nothing wrong with that." She understood. She stood with her back to the terminal. She heard keys. She heard Collins reading under his breath. Not the words, just the cadence of someone moving through a document. Then he stopped. "It's all here," he said. Mission record, commendation citations, Torres's final transmission, the 47 minutes. A pause. "And something else." Yarrow said, "What?" "A flag. Placed on this record 8 months ago by a Security Division administrative account." His voice was very controlled. "The flag marks the record as pending review for reclassification. The account that placed it, I need you to pull the base Security Division personnel roster." Yarrow pulled it on her phone. "The account ID," Collins said. He read off a string of numbers and letters. Yarrow looked at her phone, her jaw tightened. "That's Hale's administrative account." "He flagged Havoc's commendation record for reclassification 8 months ago," Collins said, "which is 6 months before Havoc's removal order. He knew about the sealed record. He was trying to bury it deeper before he moved." He paused. "He also knew about me." The room was very quiet. "He knew," Collins said again, not louder, just more certain. "And he moved anyway, which means he either believed I wouldn't find out in time, Or he believed that by the time I did, the transfer would be complete and Havoc would be in a Velos facility where my emergency contact status was unenforceable. He closed the terminal window. He was probably right about the timeline. He wasn't right about enough else. They left the skiff at 0244. The NCIS agents arrived at 0407. Two of them, a woman named Vasquez, who was the senior agent, and a man named Prout, who carried a laptop bag and spoke very little. They set up in the base conference room that Yarrow opened for them and spent the first 20 minutes with Collins alone. Maya and Yarrow waited in the hallway outside, which was the kind of waiting that had a different texture than the waiting of the previous night. Less desperate, more like the feeling of standing on a platform after a train has already been called. At 0431, Vasquez opened the conference room door and looked at Maya. Petty Officer Caldwell, come in. Prout had his laptop open and was connected to something via a cable Maya didn't recognize. Vasquez sat across from Maya and put a recorder on the table and stated the date and time and the case reference number that was already, apparently, a real case number, which meant Collins had called this in before he'd even arrived on base. Tell me about the maintenance request, Vasquez said. Building 14C, Velos Systems. Maya walked her through it. Vasquez asked clean questions. No leading, no editorializing. Just the specific follow-up that someone asked when they were building a timeline with precision rather than collecting impressions. She asked about the phone calls from the unknown number. She asked about Thatch's presence in Hale's office. She asked about the REIT's email and the metadata and the training yard footage deletion. She asked about everything in the order it happened, and Maya answered in the same order, and it took 40 minutes, and at the end of it, Vasquez sat back and looked at Prout, and something passed between them. The Pentagon acquisition approval, Prout said. It was the first full sentence he'd spoken in Maya's presence. The code OSE found. I've already traced it. Vasquez said, and? It's registered to an individual account in the DoD Acquisition Division, a civilian GS-15 named Harold Fenwick. Fenwick has 7 direct connections to Velos Systems through professional history. 3 are public, 4 are in personnel records. He paused. Fenwick and Thatch served together in the same naval procurement office 12 years ago. The room was quiet for a moment. So it's Hale, Thatch, and Fenwick, Yarrow said from the corner where she'd been standing since Maya came in. At minimum, Vasquez said. She looked at Collins. The sealed record, the commendation citations. Can you provide those through official channels today? My commanding officer at NISWDG can authorize release to an active federal investigation. I'll make the call at 0600. We'll need it for the falsified records charge. The removal documentation described Havoc as having no commendable service record. The commendation citations directly contradict that. Vasquez made a note. That's falsification of military records under UCMJ Article 107, and given the federal contractor involvement, it triggers Title 18 as well. She paused. Commander Collins, do you know where Hale is right now? He came back to base at 0130, Yarrow said. I had the gate log him in. He's in his quarters, or was at 0130. We'll need him here before he has a chance to access the base digital system and do anything further. Vasquez closed her notebook. Master Chief, I'd like 2 MPs at his quarters door within the next 15 minutes. Detain, don't arrest yet. We need the warrant, which I'm filing in the next 10 minutes. I can make that happen, Yarrow said. I also need to know if Thatch is still on base. He left at 1748 yesterday evening. No record of return. We'll pick him up separately. Vasquez stood. She was efficient in the way of someone who had done this enough times that the procedure lived in her body rather than her memory. Petty Officer Caldwell. She looked at Maya directly. You ran a 14-hour documentation effort starting at 0400 yesterday with no formal authority and no institutional support from this base's command structure, which produced the foundational evidence for what is now a federal procurement fraud investigation. She paused. I want you to know that will be in my report. Maya didn't know what to say to that. She said, thank you. Thank your instincts, Vasquez said. They were better than your rank. Hale was escorted to the base conference room at 0519 in the morning. Maya was not in the conference room when it happened, but she heard it described afterward by Presser, who had been notified by the MP unit because he was the duty adjutant, and duty adjutants got notified of command-level detentions, and who had driven to the admin building still pulling on his jacket and had stood in the corridor outside the conference room for 30 seconds before deciding he needed to tell someone what he'd just seen. He found Maya in the kennel block, where she'd returned at 0500 because it was the only place she could sit without someone needing something from her. He was in his uniform, Presser said. He sounded like someone who was processing something that didn't fit the shape of the world he'd been operating in. Full uniform. He'd been awake. I don't know if he slept. Agent Vasquez read him the detainment grounds, and he didn't say anything. He just... Presser stopped. He looked at me. I was standing in the corridor, and he saw me through the door, and he looked at me like he was trying to figure out when I'd made the decision. "What did you do?" Maya said. "Nothing. I just stood there." He looked at his hands. "I guess that was the decision." At 0547, Collins left the base to drive to Havoc County. He asked Maya if she wanted to come. She said yes before he finished the sentence. They drove in his SUV through a Virginia morning that was just beginning to suggest light at its edges, the sky over the coastal water doing that particular shift from black to dark blue that happened in the half hour before sunrise. Collins drove the way he did most things, without wasted motion, not fast, just purposeful. He didn't talk much on the drive, and she didn't either. At one point he said, "Yarrow told me you made the JAG call at 0600 yesterday morning, 4 hours after they took him." 2 hours, she said. "The call was at 0600. They took him at 0600. I made the call immediately." He glanced at her. "You had his number in 2 hours." "Kwame found it in 11 minutes. I just had to know what to ask for." Collins was quiet for a moment. "Torres would have done the same thing." He said it simply, not as a comparison or a compliment, just as a thing that was true. He had the same instinct. When something was wrong, he moved toward it. She didn't answer because there was nothing to add to that. The Havoc County Animal Control Facility was a low concrete building set back from the road behind a chain-link parking area. Ferris was standing outside when they pulled in, a man in his late 50s with the specific posture of former military at rest, which looked like civilian slouch but wasn't. He shook Collins's hand and then Maya's and led them inside without preamble. The large dog intake area was at the back of the building. 8 kennels, 6 occupied. The one at the far end had a door with a handwritten card slipped into the label holder that said, in Ferris's handwriting, "Hold. Federal." Havoc was standing at the front of the kennel when they came in. His ears went up. Collins walked directly to the kennel door and crouched in front of it, and Havoc crossed the distance between them in one stride and pressed his head through the chain link, and Collins put both hands on the dog's face, and they stayed like that for a moment that Maya watched from 10 feet away and did not photograph and did not interrupt. "I got you, brother," Collins said. His voice was very quiet. "I got you." Havoc made a sound she had never heard him make in 14 months. Not a whine and not quite a bark. Something between them. Something that was too specific to be called just a sound. Ferris unlocked the kennel door. Havoc came out and pushed immediately against Collins's legs, and then turned and looked at Maya and pushed against her legs too, and she put her hand on the top of his head and felt him lean into it, and the solid, specific, unglamorous reality of 87 pounds of living dog pressing against her at 0611. In the morning, after a night she would not forget for the rest of her life, undid something in her chest that had been held very tight for a long time. She did not cry, quite, but it was close. They were walking back through the intake corridor, Havoc between them, when Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Yarrow. "Warrant executed 0608. Hale arrested." Thatch picked up at a hotel in Chesapeake by Norfolk Field agents at 0603. Fenwick served at his home in Arlington at 0610 by FBI. Vasquez says all 3 are in custody. She stopped walking and read it twice. Collins looked at her. "What?" She handed him the phone. He read it. He handed it back. He looked at Havoc, who was sitting between them in the concrete corridor of a county animal control facility at dawn, waiting to see what happened next the same way he always waited. Ears forward, weight balanced, entirely patient. "Okay," Collins said. It was a quiet word for the size of the thing it was covering. Maya understood that. She also understood that some moments don't need a bigger word than the accurate one. They walked out into the early morning. The sky had finished its shift. Full dark blue now at the horizon, lighter above, the particular color of very early dawn over the Virginia coast. Havoc walked between them in the parking lot and didn't pull the lead, just moved with them, his nails clicking on the concrete, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. Maya's phone buzzed again. Yarrow. Also, Base CO has been informed of the full scope by Vasquez. He pulled the K9 program suspension proposal from his queue and has requested a full administrative review of all Hale-era Security Division decisions. He's asking for a meeting with you and Collins at 0900. Below that, 30 seconds later, he used the word briefed. He did not use the word sorry, but he looked like he was thinking it. Maya read it and showed it to Collins, who read it with the expression of someone who has been in enough of these moments to know that institutional acknowledgement rarely looked the way it should. 0900, he said. Yes. Then we have time. He looked at his watch, then at the facility building, then at the road. Is there somewhere near here that has actual coffee? She thought about the machine in Building 9's break room. Not on base, she said, but Harwick has a diner that opens at 6. Let's go, Colin said. The three of them walked to the SUV in the early morning, and the case that had started at 0400 the previous morning with a removal order and a dog pressed against a handler's leg in a fluorescent-lit kennel block was not finished. There were warrants to be executed and testimonies to be given, and a federal investigation that would run for months, and an 0900 meeting with a base CO who looked like he was thinking a word he hadn't said. But the part of it that depended entirely on one petty officer deciding to move toward a wrong thing instead of away from it was, at 0614 on an October morning, complete. And Havoc, riding in the back seat of a black SUV with his chin on the center console, between the two people who had spent the last 18 hours keeping him alive, did not look at the door every 30 seconds anymore. He already knew where he was going. The diner was called Paulette's, and it had been open since 1987, according to the sign above the door, which Maya noted because it was the kind of place that looked like it had earned every year of that. Vinyl booths with repaired tiers, a counter with 8 stools, a coffee machine that was industrial and well-maintained and produced something that tasted like actual coffee, which after the machine in Building 9's break room felt like a minor miracle of the ordinary world. They took the corner booth. Havoc went under the table without being told and settled with his chin on Collins's boot, which was where he stayed for the next 40 minutes while they ate eggs and drank coffee and did not talk about the case for the first 20 minutes because there was an unspoken agreement between all three of them, Maya, Collins, and the dog under the table, that the case had been running for 18 hours and it could wait while they ate. The waitress, a woman in her 60s named Bev, according to her name tag, looked at Havoc when she brought the coffee and said, "Is that a police dog?" "Military?" Maya said. Bev looked at him with the assessing expression of someone who has strong opinions about dogs generally. "He looks tired." "He had a long night," Colin said. "I'll get him some water." She did, without being asked again, in a wide ceramic bowl that she set under the table without fanfare. Havoc drank half of it. Bev refilled their coffee and left them alone, which was the right thing to do, and Maya was grateful for it. At some point during the second cup, Colin said, "The Aero 900 meeting, the CO is going to want a narrative he can control." "I know." "He's going to frame it as the base's internal oversight functioning correctly." Collins held his cup with both hands. He wasn't part of Hale's scheme, but he wasn't paying attention either, and he'll want to draw a line between those two things that's wider than it actually is. "What do you want me to say in there?" He looked at her. "The truth. In the same order you told it to me and to Vasquez. Let him draw whatever lines he wants. The documentation doesn't move." She nodded. She ate some of her eggs, which were scrambled and slightly overcooked, which was fine. Slightly overcooked eggs in a corner booth at 0630 in the morning, after no sleep, were not a thing she was going to complain about. "The record," she said after a while. "Torres, you don't have to answer this." Collins looked at his coffee. "Ask. How long ago?" 4 years. He turned the cup slightly in his hands. Torres was 29. He'd been with the team 3 years. Havoc was his first assignment as primary handler. A pause. He used to say the dog was smarter than most of the team, which was true, depending on the day. He didn't smile at that, but something moved in his face that wasn't grief and wasn't the absence of it either. The mission that went wrong. It wasn't anyone's fault. Those missions that go wrong in that specific way usually aren't. The intel was bad, and the terrain was different than the models showed, and those things combined in the worst possible sequence. He paused. But Havoc stayed with him. For 47 minutes. In a position where every training protocol said to retreat, he stayed. Maya didn't say anything. After the extract, the team wanted to keep him. Bring him into SEAL Team 8 officially. Collins set down his cup. But the mission was sealed, and Havoc's connection to it was sealed. And the bureaucratic decision was to transfer him into a standard K-9 unit where his history was classified and his record was clean, and nobody would have to explain why a decorated special operations dog was showing up on a security base's roster. He paused. It was the wrong call. I said so at the time. I was overruled. He looked across the diner. And then Hale found out what was in the sealed file and decided that a dog with a classified commendation history was a liability to his scheme, and he stopped. And here we are. And here they were, in a corner booth at Paulette's Diner in Harwick, Virginia, at 0638 in the morning, with a Belgian Malinois under the table drinking from a ceramic bowl. He's going to be okay, Maya said. She meant it as a statement about Havoc, but it was also something else. Yeah, Collins said. He is. The 0900 meeting with Base Commander Captain Aldrich Summers lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes, which was longer than it needed to be and shorter than Maya had feared. Summers was 53, gray-haired, the specific kind of senior officer who was competent at administration and had never been tested by anything that required a different kind of competence. He wasn't corrupt. He was the thing that made corruption possible in functional institutions. He was incurious. He had signed off on Hale's appointment, approved his security division budget requests, accepted his briefings, and had not once looked at anything closely enough to see what was sitting beneath the surface of it. He knew that now. Maya could see him knowing it in the careful way he sat in his chair at the head of the conference table, and in the way he looked at everything except the wall where the documentation had been projected by Prout, who had set up the display before the meeting and then taken a seat at the far end of the table and said nothing for the entirety of it. Vasquez ran the meeting, not Summers, which told Maya everything about the power distribution in the room. Summers had offered to run it, and Vasquez had said pleasantly that given the scope of the federal investigation, she'd need to lead the briefing herself, and Summers had agreed in a way that was compliance dressed as graciousness. Vasquez walked him through the case in 45 minutes. She did not editorialize. She presented the documentation, the fabricated reports, the deleted footage, the Velos contractor connection, the maintenance request, the Pentagon approval, the sealed record, the commendation citations, Collins's emergency contact status, and let it stand as its own argument. Summers asked 3 questions, 2 of which were about process, and 1 of which was about liability, and all 3 of which told Maya he was calculating how this would look rather than responding to how it was. Collins said very little. He sat 2 seats from Summers and answered the direct questions he was asked with the specific economy of someone who has testified in official settings many times and has learned that extra words create extra problems. When Vasquez finished, Summers turned to Maya. "Petty Officer Caldwell," he said. His voice had the texture of a prepared statement. "The actions you took over the past 24 hours, acting without formal authorization, accessing administrative systems outside your clearance designation, coordinating with external parties prior to notifying base command." "Captain." Collins said it once, without inflection. Summers stopped. Collins looked at him. The look was not aggressive, it was simply direct, which in a room where everyone else was being careful, managed to be the most forceful thing in it. Petty Officer Caldwell notified base command. She notified Master Chief Yarrow at 0730 yesterday morning. She brought documentation of fabricated medical records to the JAG office. She held a federal transfer authorization for 11 hours through legal means alone. He paused. She did everything correctly. She did it without institutional support, because the institution had been compromised by the officer who was supposed to run it. Those are 2 separate facts, and I'd recommend keeping them that way in whatever report comes out of this room. Summers was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Maya with an expression that had shifted, not dramatically, not into anything that looked like a reckoning, but into something that acknowledged the room had a shape he hadn't fully seen when he walked into it. "The actions you took were outside standard protocol," he said. "Under the circumstances, they were also necessary." He stopped there, which was not an apology and was not designed to be, but was what it was. Yarrow, from her seat against the wall, made a small sound that was not quite agreement and not quite contempt, and managed to be both. The rest of the meeting covered the investigation scope, the K-9 program status, the Base Security Division reorganization, and the formal process for Havoc's case adjudication. Mack presented the case for full record restoration. Collins confirmed he would provide the mission commendation documentation through NSWDG channels. Vasquez confirmed the federal prosecution timeline and noted that all three defendants, Hale, Thatch, and Fenwick, had been transported to federal holding facilities, and that initial arraignment was scheduled for the following week. At the end, Summers said he would be issuing a formal statement to the base. He asked Vasquez for guidance on language. She gave it to him in 4 sentences. He wrote it down. Maya sat through it all and felt the strange flatness that comes after very long nights. Not emptiness exactly, but the absence of adrenaline, which turns out to take up a lot of space when it's present and leaves an odd quiet when it goes. The week that followed was not clean. No week that contains a federal investigation, a base reorganization, an NCIS evidence processing protocol, and a military working dog records adjudication process was ever going to be clean. It was paperwork and interviews and waiting rooms, and the specific bureaucratic friction of multiple agencies who each needed the same documentation in slightly different formats. Vasquez's team worked from the base conference room for 6 days straight. Maya was interviewed formally twice, once by Vasquez and once by an FBI agent named Hollister, who was assigned to the Fenwick component of the case, and who asked many of the same questions Vasquez had asked, but in a different order, which Maya understood was intentional. Kwame was interviewed once, formally, and came out of it pale but intact. He had not technically violated any access protocols. He'd operated entirely within publicly accessible systems, which he had known when he was doing it, and which turned out to be the correct approach. The monitoring script he'd run on the procurement database was, legally, the equivalent of a persistent Google search. Nobody could touch him for it. This did not stop him from being uncomfortable for several days, which Maya thought was reasonable. Presser resigned his position as adjutant to Hale's office and requested reassignment to a different division. Yarrow signed off on it without comment. He was reassigned to base logistics. Maya didn't see him again before he moved offices, but he left an envelope in the kennel block with her name on it that contained a single handwritten line. "For what it's worth, I should have looked sooner." She put it in the back of Havoc's physical file, behind the vaccination records and the bite sleeve log. Reitz, Corman Reitz, whose name had started all of this, came to find her on day 4. He was 23 and looked younger, and he stood in the doorway of the kennel block with the specific physical awkwardness of someone who doesn't know what to do with their hands when they're sorry. "The supplemental report," he said. "I want you to know I didn't write the second one. I didn't write the first one either. Someone from Hale's office asked me to sign it, and I didn't think—" He stopped. "I should have thought." "Yes," Maya said, not unkindly, just accurately. "Is he—" He looked at Havoc's crate, which was occupied again. Havoc was lying on his mat with his chin on his paws, watching Reitz with calm assessment. "Is he going to be okay?" "He's fine." Maya looked at Reitz. "You should talk to Mac, not because you're in trouble, because you should have your account of the original incident on the official record." He nodded. He looked at Havoc for another moment. He didn't do anything wrong that day. He was just doing what he was trained to do. "I know," Maya said. Reitz left. Havoc watched him go and then looked at Maya and then put his chin back on his paws, satisfied that the interaction had concluded appropriately. The formal adjudication of Havoc's case happened on day 8 in a JAG proceeding that lasted 40 minutes. Mack presented the evidence, the fabricated documentation, the deleted footage that NCIS had recovered from Hale's Security Division server backup. The backup that Villalos's technician had not been able to reach because it was on a system 2 levels removed from the one they'd accessed. The original Reitz email, the commendation citations from the sealed record, now unsealed for the purpose of the proceeding. The presiding officer was a commander named Idris Farhan, who read every document with the thoroughness of someone who understood what the case actually was beneath its surface, which was not just a dog service record, but a test of whether institutional pressure could make a truth disappear if it was applied with enough force for long enough. The verdict took 6 minutes to deliver. All charges against military working dog Havoc, service number MWD 77741, were vacated in full. His service record was restored to its complete form. The fabricated incident report and the supplemental medical assessment were formally expunged and flagged in the investigative record as manufactured evidence. His commendation history, including the classified mission citation, was transferred from sealed to classified commended status, which meant it existed in his record and could be accessed by authorized personnel but remained protected from public disclosure. Mac read the verdict aloud. Maya sat in the JAG hearing room and listened to every word of it. When Farron finished, he looked up from the documents. He looked at Maya. "Handler of record," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." 14 months. "Yes, sir." He looked at Havoc, who was sitting beside Maya's chair at attention in the way he sat when he understood something formal was happening, which he always did. "Dismissed," Farron said. "All of you. You've done enough." The consequences for Hale, Thatch, and Fenwick resolved over the following months, but the shape of them was clear within the first 3 weeks. Victor Hale was charged with 8 federal counts: falsification of military records, conspiracy to commit procurement fraud, obstruction of a federal investigation, abuse of authority, and 4 counts related to the unauthorized deletion and modification of official records. His attorney filed for a reduction on the grounds of career service and no prior disciplinary record. Vasquez filed the sealed record commendation citations in response, and the reduction was denied. He was dismissed from the Navy and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, with an additional 2 years suspended pending conduct. Raymond Thatch faced charges of procurement fraud, conspiracy, and 2 counts of illegal access to a federal facility through fraudulent pretenses. Specifically, his presence in Hale's office with access to the Base Security Division computer. His status as a former naval officer did not help him. It arguably made it worse. He was convicted on all counts and received 6 years, with the sentence structured to run consecutively to any future related charges, which the court noted were possible given the ongoing nature of the investigation into Vealos's other proposed contracts. Harold Fenwick, at the Pentagon Acquisition Division, lost his position within a week of his arrest. The DoD Office of Inspector General opened a parallel investigation into the Acquisition Division's oversight processes. Fenwick's approval of the Vealos proposal was the centerpiece of an inquiry that ultimately identified 4 additional proposals in the review queue that had received expedited processing through his office without standard competitive bidding. He pled guilty to 2 counts of procurement fraud and 1 count of conflict of interest and received 3 years plus restitution. He also forfeited his federal pension, which his attorney appealed twice unsuccessfully. Vealos Systems Integration had its DoD contracting registration revoked within 30 days of the arrest. The company's 3 other proposed government contracts, not just at Redstone Harbor, but at 2 Army installations and 1 Coast Guard station, were pulled from review. The company filed for dissolution 2 months later. The Sentry Array product, which had never been operationally deployed, existed afterward only as a series of trade show photographs and a failed patent application. The K-9 program at Redstone Harbor was not suspended. It was expanded. Summers approved the budget for 2 additional handlers and a new training facility, which was either genuine institutional learning or the specific overcorrection of a man who understood that his legacy at this installation had just changed shape and was trying to adjust the frame. Yarrow told Maya it was probably both. Maya thought that was probably right. The CO's formal statement to the base, issued on day 3, credited the integrity of the base's enlisted personnel and the naval justice system for uncovering the scheme. It did not mention Maya by name, which Yarrow noted to Summers directly, in his office, in a meeting Maya was not in, but heard about from Yarrow herself. He said he didn't want to create a public profile for an active duty enlisted member that might complicate her career, Yarrow told her. "What did you say?" "I said that was a considerate instinct applied to the wrong situation, and that her name should be in the statement." Yarrow looked at Maya with the expression of someone who has spent 11 years doing this kind of thing. "He's issuing a revised statement tomorrow." The revised statement mentioned her by name. Maya read it once, in the break room in Building 9, the good one, the one with the harbor window, and then put her phone in her pocket and drank her coffee and watched the water for a while. Collins came back to Redstone Harbor on day 12. He came to finish the official paperwork for Havoc's case status, which required his signature as the emergency contact of record and as the commanding officer authorizing the commendation citation transfer. He was also, though he didn't say this when he called ahead, there for something else. He found Maya in the kennel block at 1400. Her new shift, adjusted after the investigation period, mornings now, instead of the split shift she'd been working. Havoc went to him immediately, and Collins spent a minute just standing with the dog before he got to the reason he'd come. He had a folder. NSWDG is establishing a formal K9 integration program, he said. Special Operations Embedded Handlers. The idea is to place trained military K9 teams within SEAL support structures, not deployed operators, but the handler network that keeps the working dogs functional and trained between deployments. He put the folder on the handler's desk. The program needs someone to build the training curriculum, the selection criteria, the handler evaluation process. He looked at her. It's a petty officer first-class billet. You'd promote. The assignment is at Little Creek. Maya looked at the folder. She looked at Havoc. She looked at Collins. Why me? She said. Not false modesty, an actual question. Collins didn't have the expression of someone delivering a compliment. He had the expression of someone delivering an accurate assessment. Because you found Torres's file in 14 months without anyone telling you it existed. Because you held a federal transfer authorization for 11 hours with a rank that gave you no institutional authority to do it. Because you spent an entire night building a case against a security division commanding officer using public databases and an informal contact network and one document that a 25-year-old adjutant handed you in a break room. He paused. And because Havoc trusts you, which is, for the specific purpose of building this program, the most relevant qualification. She was quiet for a moment. The curriculum. I'd be building it from scratch. Mostly, there are some existing frameworks from the Warcom K9 support structure I can give you access to. But the integration component, embedding handlers in special operations support networks, that doesn't have a curriculum yet. That's a 2-year project minimum. At least. He didn't make it sound smaller than it was. You'd have support staff and a budget and a direct reporting line to NSWDG. You'd also have a lot of days where you're building something that's never been built before, which is uncomfortable, and there's no clean template for it. Maya looked at the folder for another moment. She thought about Redstone Harbor, the kennel block, the handler's desk, the harbor view from the Building 9 break room, the specific rhythms of a security installation that she'd learned in 11 months and which had become, in the way routines become, the texture of her days. She thought about Crate 7 and the laminated card, and the moment she'd stood in the parking lot with the October wind in her face after they'd taken Havoc, and understood she had no institutional support and was going to do it anyway. She thought about Torres, 29 years old, whose name she'd never known until 12 days ago, who had loved this dog, and who the dog had loved back with the particular loyalty of an animal that doesn't love easily or carelessly. Havoc, she said. Collins understood the question. He retires from active K9 duty, formally. His record reflects full commendation status. He transitions to a non-operational role. Officially, that means handler companion. Practically, it means he goes where you go. He paused. He's earned it. Maya nodded slowly. She picked up the folder. She opened it and read the first page, which was the formal billet description, and the second page, which was the program scope document, and the third page, which was a letter from the NSWDG commanding officer addressed to Petty Officer Maya Caldwell, Redstone Harbor, dated the previous week. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The first described the program. The second described what they were looking for. The third said, in the particular language of formal military correspondence, your actions in the matter of military working dog Havoc demonstrated a quality of judgment, initiative, and commitment to the welfare of a fellow service member, human and canine, that the Naval Special Warfare Development Group considers foundational to the mission this program is designed to serve. We hope you will accept this assignment. She read it twice. She looked at Havoc, who was sitting next to Collins's leg, and looking at her with the forward-eared attention he gave to things he was evaluating. Yes, she said. Collins nodded once. He took the folder back, pulled a signature page from inside it, and put it on the handler's desk. She signed it. He countersigned it. The whole thing took 4 minutes and did not look, from the outside, like the kind of moment it actually was. Her last morning at Redstone Harbor was a Friday, 3 weeks after the night at Harwick County. She did the things she'd done every morning for 11 months, up before the alarm, uniform in the dark, the quarter-mile walk to the kennel block, while the harbor did its morning thing with the light. She fed the 2 remaining dogs, checked the water systems, updated the daily log. She did all of it at her normal pace because rushing would have been its own kind of statement, and she didn't want to make that statement. Yarrow came at 0730, which was early for her, and stood in the kennel block doorway with coffee from somewhere that wasn't the cafeteria. "Little Creek's a good assignment," Yarrow said. "Yes. You'll fight with people about the curriculum. Probably." "Good." Yarrow handed her one of the coffees. "The ones who don't fight about the curriculum are the ones who don't care about it." They drank coffee in the kennel block, while the morning light came through the high windows and Havoc lay on his mat in crate 7 with his eyes half open, resting the way dogs rest when they've decided the environment is safe and they don't need to monitor it constantly. At some point, Yarrow said, 11 years ago, I signed a document I shouldn't have signed. I've been looking for 11 years to understand what the correct version of that situation looked like." She paused. "You showed me." Maya didn't know how to answer that, so she said, "You made a lot of calls in the right order at the right time. That mattered." "We both did," Yarrow said. "That's how it usually works when it works." She left at EO 800. Maya stayed for another hour, finishing the log, doing the last checks, going through the routine because the routine deserved a proper ending. Then she packed the physical file from the cabinet, Havoc's file, vaccination records and training logs and bite sleeve maintenance, and the zip-tied laminated card from above crate 7, which she'd taken down the evening before and folded carefully into the back of the folder. "Trust the dog. He already knows." She'd written that in a moment she barely remembered, but she understood it better now than she had when she'd written it. It wasn't advice about the dog. It was advice about moving in situations where the outcome was unclear and the support was insufficient, and the only thing you could count on was your own read of what was right. The dog knew. The dog always knew. You moved with that knowledge, or you spent your whole life explaining why you didn't. She walked out of the kennel block with Havoc on lead and her kit bag on her shoulder and didn't look back, because looking back was a habit she was working on. Quaim was in the parking lot when she came out, leaning against his car with his hands in his pockets, and the expression of someone who had prepared something to say and was now not sure he was going to say it. "Safe travels," he said. "Thank you, Quaime. I'm going to put in for a transfer too." He looked at his shoes. "Not because of this. I've been thinking about it for a while." He paused. "This just clarified some things." "Where?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere I haven't been." He shrugged in the way of people who have decided that open-endedness is actually the point. "I'm better than I think I am at finding things people don't want found. I should probably work somewhere that uses that." "You should," she said. "You are." He nodded. He looked at Havoc. "Good dog," he said. Havoc looked at him with the assessment expression. Then he looked away, which Kwame took as something neutral, and Maya recognized as mild approval. She drove out the main gate at 0912, Collins's program folder on the passenger seat, Havoc in the back with his chin on the center console, the Virginia coast doing what it always did in late October, gray-green water and wind and a sky that couldn't make up its mind between clear and not. She did not know what building a training curriculum from scratch for a program that had never existed before would actually feel like on the 3rd week, or the 3rd month, or when the budget was wrong and the reporting structure was unclear and she was trying to teach something she'd only ever done instinctively. She did not know how the program would turn out, or whether it would be what Collins thought it could be, or whether she was actually the right person to build it. She knew she would fight about the curriculum with people who didn't care about it, the same way she did. She knew there would be days where nothing was clean and the template didn't exist, and she had to build the next step out of the materials available, the way she'd spent one night in October building a federal case out of a maintenance request and an adjutant's conscience and an 11-minute phone search. She knew Havoc would be there, on the passenger seat or under the desk or on the mat in the next room, breathing, patient, already knowing. And she knew this: the people who had looked at her and decided she was too low-ranking, too new, too without standing, too peripheral to matter. They had made that calculation without the one variable that changes every calculation it enters. They had been thorough. They had been institutional. They had controlled the documentation, the footage, the medical records, the procurement process, the phone calls. They had not controlled what one person decided to do at 4 in the morning when she found out something was wrong. That's the part they always underestimate. The part that isn't about rank or clearance or institutional authority. The part that is just, a person sees a wrong thing and moves toward it instead of away, and keeps moving, and doesn't stop, and does the next thing that needs doing, and the next, until the truth is in enough hands that it can't be put back in a folder and sealed. They underestimated that because they'd never had it themselves, and so it had never occurred to them that someone else might. The road to Little Creek ran along the coast for a stretch, and the water was visible between the trees, flat and gray and wide, the kind of water that doesn't care what you're carrying or where you've been. Maya watched it through the passenger window and felt the specific weight of someone who has done the right thing in a situation where doing it was genuinely hard, which is a different weight than pride and a different weight than relief. It's heavier than both and quieter than either. Havoc shifted in the back seat and put his chin on her shoulder from behind, which was something he'd started doing in the past 3 weeks and which she had not discouraged. "I know," she said. He breathed out slowly, the way dogs do when they've decided that wherever they are is where they're supposed to be. She kept driving.